All right, close enough. So welcome everybody. My name is John Gestel. I am our client relations coordinator here. With me is Dayton O'Connor. He is our lead analyst. And then Rob Bernhardt, he is our corporate counsel here. So the way we typically handle these office hours is first we run through all the submitted questions from various people who have signed up. We've got about 40 of them here. And then we'll address any live questions. If you guys have anything specific you want to ask, again, through the Q&A, but we'll just get started. So first question that we have here, will there be a mobile app version of Royalty Exchange? There are no plans to have a mobile app. The site is mobile friendly, so you can always access everything just through your mobile device, but there is no formal mobile app. Next one here, how much is the average song? So that's a pretty difficult thing to conceptualize just because we look at assets as a catalog. So we couldn't put a price point on any particular song unless it was a one song catalog, which, you know, those do exist, but they're kind of infrequent. Right now, I believe the average catalog sale price is around $90,000. But that average is derived from a huge spectrum of pricing, you know, from just a couple $1,000s to a couple million. So that's kind of why it's that high. Next question here, how can you get in at the ground floor and find cheaper royalties? So you can filter by pricing on the exchange. That's really the best way to approach it. So if you just slide your sliders down to the lower margins, that will automatically show you the lower price options. So you can do that by list price or by last 12 months earnings. You know, normally we look at a multiple of last 12 months earnings. So if you have that at a lower figure, you'll see cheaper assets. There's also a preset filter to sort from low to high for pricing, so you can always use that as well. Next question here, how soon after making a purchase will I receive any benefits? I assume by benefits you mean payments, and that really depends on what the asset is, who is providing the royalty payments, and when you bought it. So we pay out royalties based on when the royalties are paid. And every company that provides royalty payments works on a different distribution schedule. So say you bought from like a Sony, someone who pays twice a year, and you bought right after distribution, it could take you up to 6 months to get that first payment. Whereas if you bought a catalog that's originating from like Sound Exchange, which pays monthly, then you could see one in just a couple weeks. So it really depends on the asset. Always make sure you understand who the royalty payor is. There will always be a tag denoting who is providing the payments. And then on our period by period payment graph, you can see the distribution frequency and what to expect with that. So that information is always going to be available to you.
And to add on to that, John, so as an investor, once you complete a purchase, once an offer is accepted, that's the effective date of the purchase. And as the investor, you're entitled to all payments that are made after that date. So what you're going to see on every listing is the most up-to-date payment history. That'll show you the most recent payment, and then typically you'll be entitled to the very next payment, kind of depending on that schedule again. But it's important to know that when you buy this, you will be getting the next payment after that offer is accepted.
Perfect. And further clarification here, those payment dates are hard lines in the sand, and we don't prorate. So if you bought an asset and the very next day after your purchase date, there's distribution, you would be entitled to the entirety of that distribution. You wouldn't get like, oh, the 1 day equivalent of that payment period. And the same works in the back end. If you sold your asset and the next day there's a distribution, you would be entitled to 0 of that following payment. So another important thing to keep in mind. Next question here, is there a more detailed primer on the open royalties? How do you purchase closed royalty assets? Are there financing options? And then it says payment term, which I assume is about terms. So we'll take these one at a time here. Is there a more detailed primer on the open royalties? So for that, I'm going to point you to our investor blog. We keep a bunch of walkthroughs on the different royalty types, how the market works, who's collecting which royalties, and how those royalties work. So I'd say take a look at that. That's going to be your best primer, so to speak. We've got some great infographics, things like that to kind of help you conceptualize the flow of royalties. You should get that stuff automatically when you sign up. We do kind of like a drip sequence that sends you a bunch of information, but it's always available on the site. So go to the blog, go to the investor guides. How do you purchase closed royalty assets? For that, just find the current listing. Anything that transacts in the market will automatically relist on behalf of investors. This is to provide you with, the most optimal liquidity options for your asset. There's no obligation to sell by having that stuff up there, but then it opens you up to offers in case someone makes you, a great offer. So just find the new listing. It's possible there may not be a new listing. Not everything can be automatically relisted, but we put everything up that we can. So check the market first. If you really can't find it, reach out to us and we can see. Next here, financing options. To our knowledge, there are no institutions that provide financing for this stuff. If you find one or get financing, let us know. I'd love to hear about it. I think in my experience, I've heard of one investor ever successfully getting financing. I couldn't tell you where they got it from, but that's the only instance I've ever heard. People ask all the time. So yeah, if you are successful, let us know. We'd love to learn. And then payment terms. Our payment terms are pretty straightforward. You need to fully fund any asset purchase you make within 2 business days. That's really the biggest rule of the site for investors. You would have been made aware of this during your investor verification. It's a big important rule. If you feel there's going to be an issue with making that timeline, let us know. Sometimes we can be flexible for whatever reason, depending on what's going on. But if you're communicative with us, that always helps. But yeah, 2 business days to fund any asset purchases. Next question here. How do you sort by rate of return? You can't, because the rate of return you get kind of depends on the price you get for the asset, and that's anyone's guess. So there is no way to sort by that. Really depends on the price you pay. Next question here. What is a good royalty buy? So this is kind of the $1 million question, isn't it? We are not financial advisors. We cannot provide you investment advice, direct you towards assets that are considered good. But we give you a bunch of metrics to kind of help you determine what's a riskier versus not as risky asset. And that's mostly through dollar age, as well as, LTM and sources, what all that stuff looks like. Obviously, the whole picture together is kind of how you determine the risk profile of any asset. But depending on what your goals are, what would be considered a good buy could change. So look at your goals, determine what you want, what you're trying to get accomplished, and that's going to be the best way to determine a good royalty buy. You guys have anything to add?
We may want to give a little high level information on dollar age, LTM. If folks are new, then maybe those are kind of new concepts to them.
Okay.
So you'll see in each listing, LTM, that means the last 12 months. That means literally the earnings that have come through in the last 12 months. We show all the royalty data that we have available. So it's always able for you to download, kind of analyze on your own. But then we'll also kind of compile it in a more easy to digest graph. One concept that you can read more about on the blog is called dollar age. And really what that is kind of a weighted average of the earnings and how long it's been earning. Each song kind of has its own earning trends, and a lot of times assets on Royalty Exchange will include a catalog of multiple songs. So what the dollar age does is says, hey, what portion of this earnings can be attributed to a certain length of time, and then it kind of weights it all together. And what we found is the longer the dollar age, the more likelihood of those trends kind of continuing, which certainly is intuitive, but it's nice to have something, a kind of metric to kind of put to each catalog to be able to kind of compare apples and oranges as far as that goes.
And I just posted that dollar age link in the chat if you guys want to take a look at it. That's got the formula for it, how we calculated it, how we weighted, everything you need. Next question here. How are royalties passive income tracked? So that's done by the royalty payor, whether it's a PRO, a publisher, whoever it might be. So they do that. It's their jobs. And then they send the data to us. We send it to you depending on what you buy. So pretty straightforward. I don't know, Dayton, Rob, you guys have anything to expand on that?
Right. I guess kind of just to tie a bow on the passive part of it is typically you're buying an interest in a royalty stream that is being collected by another institution whose job it is to go out and collect these royalties and pay it through to the folks that are entitled to the payments. So as the investor, there's really nothing you need to do, and in fact don't often have the licensing authority to go out and monetize these things. You're really kind of investing alongside companies who have been established to do this, not only for the specific catalog, but for a giant catalog of writings. Usually it's like a major publisher or someone who does this really as their main point of business.
All right, next one here. With song lyrics, specific lyrics have certain percentages that generate royalties. Interested in how all that works. Rob, you want to talk about how lyrics apply?
Yeah, so the lyrics would be considered part of the musical composition copyright. So not to get too deep into the weeds, but when you hear a piece of music, typically you're going to have two distinct and separate copyrights: the sound recording, which is the actual recorded version of a song that you hear, and then the musical composition, which is the underlying music, melody and lyrics. So when a song is written, typically what will happen is that song will get registered with the publishers, and depending on who participated in writing that song, they'll get credited with a certain percentage of a songwriting credit. The lyrics themselves are not split out. It's really just they decide who contributed to the song, what percentage they deserve to be credited with as a songwriter, and then that is the percentage of royalties that they get going forward.
Next question here. Is there a maximum amount of units a person can buy? So couple things about this question. This could refer to both individual asset purchases or our private syndicates. For individual assets, no, there's no buy as much as you want, as much as you can afford. We don't sell them in a per unit. Each asset is a self-contained purchasable item. So you have to buy the whole thing. Now for our private syndicates, that is sold in units. And typically when we host a private syndicate, there is both a minimum and a maximum you can buy, because we want as many people as want to be participants in it to be able to buy. So normally the maximum is like 49%, if I'm not mistaken, Rob, maybe less. And then the minimum kind of depends on the asset, but normally it's like 7 or 8 units or something like that. Kind of depends on the size.
Yeah, this was a question that we can probably just answer now is how often do these syndicate opportunities pop up? We really haven't done one in now, more than 3 years. So probably don't need to get too deep into the weeds. We haven't done them in a while, and we don't have anything on the immediate horizon. But they are on our website. You can go check out, see what happened, what the deals were, how everything was kind of transacted on those, but no immediate plans to do that in the near future.
All right. So yeah, answers kind of yes and no. Next question here. I want to invest in royalties to show a passive income as a residence requirement. Can you provide step-by-step guidance? My gut says no. Talk to your accounting person, tax advisor. We can't provide advice on that kind of thing. Rob, anything else you want to say about that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what even that might be, so I think we better steer clear from that one.
Yeah, so talk to your own financial advisor. What is the initial investment? Depends on the asset. Every asset's got a different price, and that price can vary wildly. Expected to be some multiple of the LTM, depending on if it's a 10-year, 30-year life of rights, can impact that multiple. But yeah, totally depends. If you're looking for a low end entry point, expect more than $5,000. Typically on the low end, 5K is about the floor. Occasionally we'll see stuff under that, but it's really, really rare. Expect a 5K floor, and even those are pretty infrequent. Next one, how can we borrow against our royalties after we purchase them? Do you offer loans against our royalties in-house? So we kind of talked about leveraging a little bit already. I do like this question though, because it's not the first time I've been asked it. It would be awesome if we could have an in-house leverage system for investors, but we don't have that currently. So again, if you are successful in borrowing against a royalty stream that you buy with us, let us know. We'd love to learn about it. But to my knowledge, those opportunities don't really exist.
Yeah, and I'll just
one option. Sorry, Dayton.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
You were probably going to say what I was going to say. It was one option is, once you own an asset, then you have the opportunity to either resell a piece of it, do kind of a term deal through royalty exchange. Once you own an asset, we have an active secondary market that you wouldn't necessarily need to sell your entire interest in it. You could kind of break it up into a different percentage, and that would be kind of a way of doing it a little bit, but not necessarily like a loan product offered by royalty exchange. Sorry, Dayton, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to Rob's point, talking about like an investment strategy of, buying and holding a royalty asset versus buying and selling that asset or a portion of that asset at a later time, you might be able to realize, some benefit out of the returns you get if you sell something a couple quarters or a year out after your initial purchase. Just to John's like earlier point, going out and finding folks that would do these kinds of transactions by looking at your royalty asset and using that as collateral for a loan, I'll say from past experience, that's probably going to be a pretty difficult exercise. I'd certainly be very interested to know if there are any players out there doing those kind of transactions, because there are only a handful of lending institutions that are going to work with royalty assets at all, the stuff that's originating from music, just because not many banks and financial institutions understand what this income stream is, and they're not going to take the opportunity to educate themselves to do a one-off loan transaction.
Like I said, one instance ever. So if you're successful, let us know. Next question here. How soon after purchase of a portfolio will royalties begin? And are there any arrearages which will be paid out as well? So we already kind of answered how long it could take. Arrearages kind of depends on the asset. It's always possible if there's some dispute that happens or something like that, or when the CRB gets all its stuff together. We have another question that kind of gets into that. It's always possible, but it's kind of impossible to guess. So consider it upside, really.
I will say it does cut both ways, right? Because if we're talking about royalties in arrears, that can be in the form of prior period payments getting loaded through. It can be changes to licenses that are negotiated by whoever the royalty distributor is. So changes in those rates for prior periods, settlements, adjustments related to disputes, changes of shares on particular songs. All those can result in like arrears, or as we'll talk about them like in listings, and as you'll see in the statements, they'll be reflected as adjustments, right? But those do cut both ways. You can be the beneficiary of a credit for a prior period coming through in a distribution post acquisition. It can also be the case that there will be debits that get processed for prior periods that would negatively impact the royalties that are getting paid through to you. It goes both ways.
Next question here. What's the range of LTM multiples that account for 80% roughly of successful purchases? So this is a great question. It depends on the term length that we're dealing with. So obviously a 10-year term isn't going to command the same multiple as a life of rights asset. I don't know, Dayton, do you have those figures off the top of your head? I mean,
not off the top of my head. And to the point you just made and what we discussed already, it's going to vary a lot by dollar age. And it's also going to vary by the term structure of the deal itself. So a life of rights asset is going to command a higher set of multiples than a comparably aged 10-year asset, because you're getting the benefit of those, long tail distributions that extend out basically over an indefinite period, life of the author plus 70 years for copyright term in the US. I don't know what those ranges of like successful multiples are off the top of my head, but it's going to vary a lot by dollar age.
Yeah, definitely. For 10 years, maybe expect like 6, probably. And for life, maybe closer to 8 or 9.
I would say for 10 years, 6 is probably like the high end of it, you know,
Yeah.
probably but somewhere between like 4 to 6 is I think where you typically see a lot of those bids coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then and for life, even the range can be huge. We've seen life assets sell at 2x. We've seen some sell at 20x, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, roughly 9. I mean, if you think about it, how long is the term for a life of rights? Well, it's life of the author plus 70 years, right? So if you're accounting for a 10-year recoupment period, anything beyond that being your upside, it's pretty good margin of return. But yeah, that's kind of roughly what we see. Next one here, do you offer South Asian music royalties to purchase? I don't know if we actively have any assets from South Asian markets, but we list anything and everything that we can. So, we've got a lot of Asian music up there, whether it's, BTS or some other K-pop, J-pop band. But we've got stuff from all over the world. So it's very possible that there's some from South Asian artists. It really depends on what artists are looking to sell with us. But it's always possible we could get it. So next question here. Are royalties paid through the exchange or are they paid directly from record labels / streaming platforms? Great question. So Royalty Exchange acts as the administrator for any and all assets that transact on the platform. Unless there's some reason why a buyer needs to collect directly, we'll act as the admin. So this is really to your benefit. There's no fee for this service. We handle all the transition, all the paperwork, all the backend stuff. We've got the relationships with these companies so that we can actually get the transfer to happen, make it as passive as possible. So yeah, your payments will come ultimately from us. Part of the closing process is we set you up in our admin portal, which is where you set, your banking information. It's where you get earnings statements, where you get tax docs, everything like that. Next one here. How do I research and or receive more information about the artist I am interested in investing with? Oof, that's a tough question. We don't provide that. We don't provide specific information about who is selling. Obviously, like if there's name artists that are included in the catalog, we'll put their name up, and we'll include the track lists with any work IDs that you can kind of do research on. But as far as, if you're interested in a specific artist, we don't have a method of notifying you about if that specific artist has any royalties available.
But if you're just interested in numbers, the streaming services all provide streaming numbers. There's a service we've looked at a few times called Chartmetric. It shows how many playlists a certain song is on and trends for certain artists. I think there is certainly valuable data to be gained from the streaming services, and I think more of it is becoming made public as time goes on. So I think certainly start with the streaming services, but then there's a few aggregators as well, like I mentioned, Chartmetric's one that can give you a lot more insights on the actual streaming activity.
Yeah. So for third-party searches, yeah, that's a great suggestion. Next one here. How to analyze a royalty for best return on investment. So yeah, again, this is the $1 million question. We can't provide you investment advice. Again, we look at a combination of things. Dollar age, earnings, sources are all great places to start. Looking at the streaming data that Rob was mentioning on Chartmetric, stuff like that, that can also be really indicative on how an artist is growing. So take that as you will, but unfortunately you have to do your own analysis. We cannot provide you analysis advice. Next one here. What are the taxes on royalties? What are the fees after a successful bid? What are we allowed to do to market our asset? Rob, you want to talk about taxes and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And this actually answers one of our live questions. So in the US, royalty payments are taxed as ordinary income. That's on a 1099 MISC. Now, if it's coming from a foreign country or going to a foreign country, then the tax treaty between the US and that country will typically come into play. But in the US, your royalties will be reported on a 1099 MISC. Let's see. what are the fees after a successful bid? If you are not an all access investor, we charge $500 or 1% of the purchase price, whichever is greater, to handle the transaction, the paperwork, the assignment documents, and then processing the assignment with the distributor itself. If you are an all access investor, then that fee is waived. If you want some more information on that, I think we could probably give you a link to that if you're interested in allocating a lot of capital within a year. It certainly pays for itself pretty quickly, and gives you some more insights that John and Dayton release from time to time as well. What are we allowed to do to market our asset? And so we mentioned a little earlier, typically what you're buying is a passive income stream without the ability to license any of the music that is generating those royalties. So you don't have the authority to go out and say, hey, you can play my song in this commercial. That still lies with the underlying publishers and labels. If you happen to know a music supervisor in show business, you can send them your music and then tell them they need to contact the publishers. But you yourself wouldn't have any licensing authority. It's typically strictly a passive income asset.
Now, that being said, I've heard lots of creative ideas from investors who want to, help supplement the plays or the growth of the song. And so, for example, there was one investor who owned a bunch of nightclubs. I think it was in Europe. His plan was to buy pop music and then play that pop music in his clubs. So, that would generate royalties, right? Other people have mentioned that they wanted to create playlists and include songs that they had the royalties to in playlists and hope to generate more royalties that way, right? So as long as you aren't breaching the copyright or breaking any of the rules with, the ownership or use, yeah, go for it. The impact that you'll make, that's kind of hard to guess, but yeah, I've heard a lot of creative ideas, so take that as you will. Next one here, the list price for assets is 20 times the LTM earnings in some cases. The ROI of such cases is minuscule going by data provided. Yeah, you're right. Ultimately, a lot of listings, I should say all listings on the exchange, the list pricing that's set by the owner of the asset. So, in some cases, if it's a resale, that might be a way for an owner to signal that they're not really interested in selling. They'll set a prohibitively high price, like a 20 times multiple. That's why we also have the offer function. Make offers on anything you find compelling. You never know whose mind's going to change at what point, what's going to suddenly come available, and you want to be a part of the conversation, or even have an open offer to that person when they do change their mind. Maybe you could buy the asset at a price that you want. So we always encourage you to make offers. But yeah, that pricing, that's all set by individuals. It's not set by us. So to that point, the exchange does filter by activity. So if an asset owner is responding to offers, they'll get bumped up in the order that you see. So stuff that's kind of more readily available will be filtered nearer the top. And of course, our featured listings are stuff that's normally primed to sell. So those are always a good place to start too. Next question here, what does the CRB3 ruling mean for royalty investors? Increased royalties going forward, back payments, no change. So this is very, very pertinent question. Rob, you want to talk about the CRB ruling?
Yeah, so CRB stands for Copyright Royalty Board, and they're set up it's a governmental entity, and what their job is, one of their jobs is to set rates for streaming royalties to be paid out to musical composition owners, so songwriters and publishers. And they do this by having hearings, and publishers and streaming services, labels, they kind of all make their case. And then the Copyright Royalty Board determines a rate that will be paid from the streaming services revenue. And the way that it's set up now is those rates are set for a period of 5 years. So the most recent one was for the period 2018 to 2022. And the board handed down their rate, which was going to increase the royalties being paid from the streaming services to the musical composition owners, so the publishers and songwriters, from 10% to 15%. And that was immediately appealed by the streaming services, and they've been fighting over it for 4 years. And just a few weeks ago, the appeal actually finally was handed down, and that increase to the rate was affirmed. So what the streaming services have to do is go back and retroactively pay those royalties based on the rates that were affirmed going back to 2018. So if you own a publishing asset that includes streaming mechanical royalties, you'll likely see a bump in payments for retroactive payments going back to 2018. It's not officially clear on what the timing of that will happen, but it will happen, and the streaming services have to abide by it. Now they're already in a fight for the next hearing that will affect rates starting in 2023. So it's kind of a constant battle. The publishers saw this one as a win. I think there was another piece of the ruling that reclassified a certain kind of earnings for bundled services. So it's really it's fluid. Based on this most recent one, whatever they come up with for 2023 will probably be appealed as well. So it's kind of a battle between the streaming services and the publishers on getting these rates and something that works for everyone involved. But certainly this most recent one was a boon to songwriters and publishers.
Awesome. Next question here. What are the best first investments on Royalty Exchange to start? Again, can't really answer that. It's up to you, what you're looking to do, what your budget is, things like that. Next one here. How will you be innovating with the rise of digital assets, tokenization, and how will royalties be integrated / secured? So NFTs, right? We have actually hosted a few NFTs on Royalty Exchange. They're pretty infrequent, but we do them. Rob, Dayton, do you guys have any specific insights you want to share on our NFTs?
Not particularly. Really what our NFTs were designed to do was for sellers who were interested in being paid in cryptocurrency and investors who were interested in collecting those royalties in cryptocurrency. We were going to facilitate a transaction where we created a token, and really the royalty payments for the specific asset that was being sold would be made in crypto. The token itself was really mostly a placeholder. The deal structure was no different than any other royalty deal we did. It was basically, hey, here's a royalty stream for sale. If you want to collect payments in crypto, then this is an asset that you might be interested in. We did it a few times. The demand wasn't super high from the investors that we saw at the time. And we haven't had a ton of interest from sellers recently either, possibly related to the crazy fluctuations in crypto recently. But we don't have any super active plans to do those immediately. I guess that's really all I've got on that.
Yeah, I will say it is something that we do watch closely. Obviously, it's a big, innovative front of the music industry. So, something that we just keep a close eye on. Next one here. Are there any Listerine royalty payment units up for sale? Not currently. But there's always a possibility that one will get resold. Another owner will approach us, which has happened a couple times. So make sure you sign up for emails. That's the best way we'll let you know. Next one here. How do you earn royalties? When is the earliest you should start seeing your royalties? Also, is this legit? We've kind of already answered this question. You earn royalties by buying one of the assets. The earliest you start seeing your royalties depends on the asset and when you buy it. And is this legit? Yes, it's very legit. How are you planning to increase the number of royalty offerings? This is a great question. So we actually have full-time staff whose whole job is working with artists in the music industry, approaching artists, educating them about what Royalty Exchange is, the opportunities they can find here. So we have full-time staff doing that. But then also, the more deals that we do, the more artists who have an experience with us, the more people talk about it, the more artists approach us. I think it's something like 60 to 70% of the deals that we ultimately do are actually word of mouth referrals from one artist to another. So it's not uncommon when we do one deal with an artist, people in their network learn about the deal and then want to do their own deals. So it kind of grows organically without us having to do a whole lot of work, but we do have full-time staff on it as well. So it kind of just grows through combination of those things. Next one here. What are good rules of thumb for new investors? Good rules of thumb.
Only invest what you can afford. Only invest in things that you understand. Ask questions. Read every piece of literature we have on the blog. I mean, there's so much information that, and it is a daunting thing to get into if you haven't dipped your toe in it before. But I would say devour all the information we have, follow all of the listings, kind of look at something you're interested in all of the bidding activity is public. You can see when offers are made and they're countered. You kind of see where the trends are heading with it. Really just kind of diving in and learning as much as you can before you actually do invest, I would say.
Yeah, that's all great. It's also not a bad idea to watch the market for a little bit, so kind of understand how things flow. Make sure you understand the tools at your disposal, like our counter offer system, our proxy offer system, list price buyouts, things like that. So that can be helpful too, as far as understanding before diving in. Next one here. Do you provide data for exchange market as a whole based on the asset type categorization? No, we don't. Any kind of higher level information like that would be something that would be included in our all access pieces, which is only for our all access members. So yeah, we don't provide that kind of bulk data. But the earnings data for every asset is available for download on the listing. So if you wanted to take on that task of looking through it all, building your own analysis, you have all the tools you need. How often do you offer assets how often do you have other assets apart from music? Every now and again. Music, of course, far and away the most common because it's the most established royalty structure. But we'll see film royalties, we'll see trademark royalties. Yeah,
you mentioned Listerine.
Yeah, Listerine.
Got music.
Yeah, so other royalties related to like movies,
films, yeah.
TV shows, yeah, other stuff comes up. I'm not sure I could ascribe a frequency to it, kind of as it comes to us. But every now and again, we probably do maybe a couple a quarter. Maybe, kind of depends. How does the bidding process work? Pretty straightforward. If you see an asset, make an offer. You can offer whatever you want for any asset. Your offer, once submitted, will get sent over to the owner. They'll get an email or whatever notification they send up to receive. They'll have the option to respond to your offer. That's either accept it, decline it, or make a counter offer. Now, any offer you make is a binding offer. Keep that in mind. So you can't withdraw it. So don't offer at your ceiling because then there's no option for negotiation, right? And the seller, same deal. If they accept an offer, that's binding. So just keep that in mind. And if you receive a counter offer, then you can choose to either accept, decline, or counter that offer, just like the seller could. And so that way, there's a bit of a negotiation opportunity there. You can also set a proxy limit. The proxies are pretty new. So the way the proxies work is you set a proxy limit on the most that you're willing to pay for an asset. No one can see that but you. The seller doesn't get to see it. The other offers don't get to see it. No one knows what your proxy limit is, so don't worry about that. Your proxy will also not respond to counter offers from a seller. It will only respond to competition offers from other investors, right? So say you offered 10K for an asset, someone offered, and you had a proxy of 20K, someone offered 15K, your proxy would automatically offer 15,100. or whatever the appropriate increment it would be for that asset. So that way you always stay as the leader until you reach your proxy limit. Yeah, so that's a really valuable tool. So you don't have to sit there and watch, stay signed in. You can kind of set it and forget it a little bit. So take a look at that tool. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. Once the deal's accepted, then we go through the closing process, which we kind of already addressed earlier today. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Last question here. When can I get started? As soon as you want. If you're a new sign up, all you got to do is get verified. Just fill out a form, send it in, start the process. It's very, very straightforward. As soon as you're verified, you're good to go. Start offering. So that's all the submitted questions we have. And we've got a couple here in the Q&A. First one, is it possible to download data for all new listings on the exchange, for instance, each month? No, we don't offer that kind of bulk download. I mean, you'd be talking about millions and millions and millions of lines of data. So we couldn't even guarantee that you would be able to download that size of a file. But, you know, any new thing that comes up, normally we'll send out a notice about it. So you can just go download the file there whenever we post new stuff. But yeah, there's no bulk download option. Next one here, do you categorize royalties based on the nature of the underlying royalty? For example, stocks are categorized based on sectors or industries. If yes, can you provide that data to investors?
Sure. Well, I guess kind of maybe not in the exact same way, but if you look at a listing, they'll have what we call the copyright table. And if it's a music asset, it'll show you which copyright the royalties derive from. So it's either the sound recording or the composition. It'll say whether it's publishing royalties, public performance royalties. It'll kind of separate out the actual type of royalty it is. And then on each listing, we'll typically tag it with a genre of music, artists. So there are ways you can tag and filter things that I think maybe gets kind of close to the categorization you might be asking about. Sectors, I mean, I guess that's about as close of an analogy that we can make with music, huh?
Yeah, I mean, other things might be like, besides rights type, genre, payor, things like that. I will say, while right now our search functionality is kind of limited to the financial metrics, we are expanding that search functionality actively. So our tech team is working on it currently. There's not a formal timeline for when those improvements will come to the site, but expect it. It's coming. And that should include things like tag searching, a text search function, rights type searches, something more direct to what you're looking for. But yeah, the closest thing that we can say is that the tags will be your best friend. Right now, just using a simple search function on the web page, that actually is more effective than you might expect, just because of our tag system. So you can pretty quickly filter through everything. It's just a huge running list of all the available assets. So there's not different pages you got to filter through. So it can be pretty effective. Yeah, no problem, Chirag. Any other questions from anyone who's here? We're going to give this a few more minutes in case you guys want to think of something that comes up. If you have questions that come up later after we conclude here, just reach out. You know, we're always happy to talk through this stuff. We can speak a bit more directly to your specific question, maybe look at examples on the website or anything like that. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us. There will be a recording of this if you want to go back and review any of our prior answers. So that will also be on the investor blog. We keep all of these sessions recorded if you want to go look back at any of the prior ones. So this will be available to you. But yeah, last call for questions here. Give you guys a couple of minutes to think it over. Let's say if at 9:53 there's no other questions, then we'll call this session concluded and wish you all a good rest of your day. So last call, questions. All right, Caleb. So for the effects of CRB3, we're basically in wait and see mode, but any retroactive payments go to current holders of the royalties. Yes, that is correct. Like we mentioned, that purchase date, that starts your entitlement, and that would include any arrearages. So yeah, if you buy something that includes streaming mechanicals, and then in a year, they start paying them out, you will be the beneficiary of those payments. Any other questions? LTM earnings could be misleading because of one-time payments. Do you plan to show 3-year trends? Yes, every listing has a 3-year average. So it has both. The last 12 months, the 3-year average. And then of course we show the, I think it's a 3-year period by period, right, Dayton?
It can vary depending on the listing. We sometimes expand it out to lifetime earnings if that's available, but 3 years is typically the standard.
Yeah. And normally if there is a large outlier payment like that, we'll actually point to it and make a note on the listing, like, hey, you'll notice there's an outlier payment in X period. We can see it as a catch-up payment, or there was a sink placement, or whatever might be the reason. So yeah, we try and arm investors with that knowledge ahead of time. And then also, of course, looking at the raw data, you'll be able to see it as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, John. I think that looking into the raw data for a given listing is super, super valuable, because you can go and pull down that file yourself, do your own analysis, see, what's the mix of the earnings coming from in terms of income source, what are the different tracks that are really generating the value for this particular catalog or this asset that you're bidding on. You can look at the trends over time on that basis, break it down into your own views that you want to take a look at. And you can also do your own analysis, looking to see what's driving the payments for these different distributions, look to see if there's any other, one-time payments or adjustments or different distribution events that are happening in that catalog that you may want to look at when you're evaluating what's the value of this when I'm bidding on this, right? Looking into the raw data, having that available as a resource, I think that's really, really powerful for investors to take a look at.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no problem, Kieran. Any last questions here? Going once. Going twice. If you're formulating a question, type anything. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining. I hope that this was helpful for you. Just to reiterate, my name is John Gestel. I am our client relations coordinator here. Dayton O'Connor is here with me, our lead analyst, and then Rob Bernhardt, who is our corporate counsel. Again, thank you guys for showing up. If you do have any other questions that come up, reach out to us. We're here, happy to help. So have a great rest of your days. And yeah, we'll be here. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.